welcome to the Vets Talking Pets podcast. From scales to tails, real talk with real vets. No pet subject is off limits. With your hosts, Dr. Maggie Roberts and Dr. Vanessa Howie.
Hello and welcome to this edition of Vets Talking Pets. In the last podcast, we talked more about the type of pet you could get. What are we going to talk about today, Maggie?
So the next thing to think about is, where do you get your pet from? Do you buy them or adopt? Adopt, don't shop is a phrase that's used a lot, and obviously, we come from working in the charity sector. So we generally encourage people with adopting, but it's not always the answer for everybody. And, to be honest, some people have experienced difficulties in getting a pet from a
I thought I was going to be a little bit controversial by saying exactly that. But people have struggled, and I think people who work full time, particularly, or with young children, it can make it quite tricky to adopt. So I don't know whether the barriers to adoption need to be relaxed more. I think it is a controversial topic because
it is, and I mean, we experienced it, when we were doing training, etc., with staff at charities that we've worked at, because the staff and the volunteers have cared for those animals, and they've done an awful lot of work to get them ready to the point where they can find a new home. So of course they want the perfect home, but the reality is there isn't a perfect home.
Does not exist.
And if people want to adopt, isn't it better that they are given that opportunity? I mean, obviously we want to match the right animal to the right home, but I think denying them a pet means then obviously they do go on to buy and or adopt from abroad, which is, I think, fraught with difficulties.
And that's it, isn't it? It's that if you can't adopt, you will go elsewhere to get your pet. If you want a pet, you will go and get one from elsewhere.
People are not going to just not get one. So I do think charities do need to have a sort of balanced attitude towards it, and I think a lot of them have got a little bit better, because certainly when I first started working cats protection, there were some very odd reasons why people were turned down, like being in the military and that sort of thing, and that has changed. But I think there's still, particularly dogs and things, like people are having enclosed gardens where people are turned down, and then increasingly people go and get something like a dog from Romania, and there are certainly a lot of issues with that sort of thing.
I think the other thing with dogs, I suppose the truth is, and sadly, that a lot of the dog rehoming centres are full of the same types of dogs, the same breeds. So actually the variety of types of breeds and types of dogs that you used to be able to get through your local rehoming centre is actually quite different now. So actually some of those dogs are maybe not appropriate to be putting into homes. Say, for example, again with elderly people, they might be big strong dogs, or with families with young children. So, and the charities do have a responsibility to ensure that home is a good home for the dog, but also actually it's safe for them to rehome that animal into that home, isn't it? For the people.
And I think that's why often they are a little bit reluctant to home some of the dogs with children. And sadly, there have been occasions where dogs have been rehomed and then they have severely bitten a child, and then of course it makes the charity more cautious after that, which is totally understandable.
Complete.
And it's quite interesting because obviously you think of the scruffy crossbreed as being the dog you get from a shelter, but actually the reality is, whatever is a really popular breed, there's a little bit of lag effect, and then the next year or two a lot of them end up in charities. So there was a big phase of lots and lots of staffies and pit bull types and whatever, and obviously now there's a few more of things like French bulldogs, where people suddenly realise that much as they're sort of quite sweet dogs, there's a lot of health problems with them. So there are dogs with problems that end up having to have surgery, and dogs that perhaps we shouldn't even be breeding. But yeah, people can't always get the sort of medium-sized crossbreed dog that they think they might get. And if you want something very specific, then obviously people think about buying. But yeah, it is difficult. And obviously you can go to pet shops if you're buying something like a guinea pig, or a rabbit, or fish, or go to an aquarium shop, something like that. Pet shops and people who sell pets like that should be licensed by the local authority, so it might be worth checking they are. Sometimes it is better just to go to someone who's breeding them directly, rather than animals that have just been sitting in the pet shop for ages. The big one, or one of several we would definitely not recommend, is buying online. The figures for how many animals are now bought online is shocking. I mean, with cats now, I think more people buy online than adopt. And you do not know if you're going to get what you think. And even sometimes in the pictures, they're not what they say. You know, there's often, it's a Bengal and it's a black and white kitten, and nothing wrong with a black and white kitten. But if someone says it's a Bengal and they're charging lots of money, it's you are being misled. And often people are not getting to see the parents, etc. So it's definitely not something that we would recommend.
So buying from abroad, I know we touched on it earlier as well, in terms of illegal imports of puppies. And there are a lot of people, and I'm going to say unfortunately, because they're not able to rehome through British rescues, like we've just touched on, end up going particularly to Eastern Europe, or rescues that are working out of the UK that are rescuing dogs from Eastern Europe and coming over. So, you know, should we be rehoming through these organisations, but also thinking about, I suppose, stray cats when you go on holiday to your European destination and you see these poor stray cats that sometimes are not in the best of health, particularly kittens, and you feel particularly sorry for them. You create a bond when you're there with them on your week's holiday, and then you decide you'd like to bring them home.
Yes, you're slipping them a little bit of fish or something, you know, under the table when you're having your meal in sort of, you know, the Mediterranean or whatever. And I totally get that people feel sorry for animals and want to bring them back to Britain. However, I think there's quite a lot of things to consider. I think firstly, you know, yes, you're giving that animal a home, but that just means there's another animal in Britain that isn't getting a home. And often those pets that are born in you know, Eastern Europe or, you know, Southern Europe, they're not necessarily sort of suited, I suppose, to a British home. A free-living cat is probably not terribly well suited to going to live in a flat in London or something like that. And the dogs are often not very well socialised, or they're used to free roaming. You know,
they're street dogs, aren't they?
Yeah, street dogs.
Used to being out and about.
And actually, they're not always unhappy. I mean, obviously some of them are ill and whatever, but some of those street dogs are actually owned, aren't they? Or they're owned by communities. So actually, you know, it's very stressful to be transported.
Some of them are being transported miles as well, aren't they? A long, long way, all in one go from that country over to the UK.
Yeah. And some of them are puppies and kittens that sadly have been deliberately bred for this market. People think they're getting a rescue, but they've actually bred them. And they're sometimes actually too young to come in because with the rules, they have to have had rabies vaccinations, etc. And they're coming in too young. And sadly, some of them are bringing in diseases that we don't have in the UK. And that is causing some serious problems, isn't it?
And I think this is with our ever-changing climate as well, then some of the diseases that have come over from the warmer countries in Europe are managing to survive over here. And we're an island, we shouldn't be letting these diseases in, but unfortunately we are.
It's often that, you know, in the vectors, the things that can carry the disease, like ticks or certain types of flies or whatever, you know, some of these ticks are coming in on the animals. And and then they're spreading them. I mean, there are cases now where dogs that have not been abroad have got exotic disease. And you may have heard of brucella, which is a disease that we used to have a lot of experience in the UK in the cattle form, but and we don't have the dog form in the UK, but now we are seeing cases in animals that are coming across, particularly unneutered females, and it is a disease that people can contract, and it can have some really negative effects. So I think these are all things that people need to think about, and there's certainly things, if you're, it's understandable people feel really sad seeing some of the state of some of the street animals, but there are things you can do without adopting.
Yeah, so certainly supporting the local charities that are generally helping is one that you can really do. And
Neutering programs particularly, because if they could get the populations a bit more under control, then all those cats would be a bit healthier, and dogs obviously as well. So supporting local charities is a much better option for good welfare. So definitely something to think about.
So another popular route for getting a pet can be through a neighbour or friend, can't they? Particularly accidental litters.
Yeah.
And so I think, that's sometimes quite a good route, isn't it? Particularly if you know that the puppy kitten has been in that home environment and actually been really well socialised to children, sounds, washing machines, all sorts of things that go on in a busy household.
They're often the ones that are most well adjusted.
Really
if they've come from a slightly hectic home, then often those kittens or puppies are the most resilient. And certainly, particularly if it's someone so the sort of environment they've been in, that often that is the best place or one of the better places. And I mean, traditionally that was particularly how people used to get cats. So it is worth thinking about that. That is not something that's terrible. Obviously we don't particularly encourage people to have a litter with their cats because there's too many, but if it does happen, that accidental litter, we know that nearly 70% of litters that are born are accidental. Then they're often a good pet to get. So there's loads and loads of options for where you can get your pets, but I suppose our main message is do your research, know where they've come from. Don't just take animals that have been delivered to you, or you meet someone somewhere a bit dodgy, because that could only end in something very negative and possibly heartbreaking, really.
Yeah, that's right. So doing your research on where you get them from, and what you should be looking for, which I think we've covered most of that earlier on, really, but just as a little bit of a recap, I suppose.
Yes, and does the pet look healthy?
Yeah, exactly.
Just basic things like,
if you see the mother, which hopefully you will, do they look healthy?
But do the puppy or the kitten or whatever, are their eyes clean? Have they got discharge or signs of diarrhea or looking dull? But if they're lively and active looking and sort of no discharges or anything like that, then obviously that's really good.
So if you can see other animals in the household, do they all look healthy? Are well cared for?
Yes.
And is the establishment, the house, wherever they are, is that clean? Is it?
Yes.
Is it where you would want to keep your puppy or kitten? So just ensuring that they've come from a healthy, well cared for household, really.
Yeah. And if there are problems, will they take the pet back?
Yeah. And is the owner, where they're coming from, are they knowledgeable? That's the other thing. So you can ask them questions about vaccinations, about worming, what they've been feeding. Do they have the answers? Or are they fobbing you off? So,
yes. Because often good breeders will have already wormed puppies and kittens. Some of them will have, depending on age, will have started the vaccination programme. Some of them will give you free insurance for you to do a little trial with that. What are you going to get? Particularly if you're paying quite a considerable amount of money, really you'd expect probably first vaccinations and worming, etc. to be done.
Yeah, you would hope so.
Defleeing. So, but it's a topic that you might have questions about, so you can always email those in.
So if you do decide to get a puppy or a kitten from a breeder, is there anything, Maggie, that we really need to be aware of for the breeders? Are there licenses or anything that we should know about?
Dog breeders who breed more than a certain number of litters a year have to be licensed by their local council, and that's all over the UK. With cats, it's a little bit different, that up until very recently, no cat breeders were licensed, but a couple of years ago in Scotland, they started licensing cat breeders and also licensing animal welfare establishments, so sort of rehoming charities and things like that, which I think is a really good thing. And hopefully at some point soon, in the rest of the UK, they'll start licensing things like cat breeders and animal charities that rehome, etc. There are lists assured breeder schemes. As I think we mentioned, that's on hold with the Kennel Club at the moment. But there's lots of information, and there is a list of breeders on their website. And all the breeders that are registered on the GCCF, the cat equivalent, they have to follow a code of ethics, so they have to have certain standards. So it's worth looking into that.
And these licenses and standards, it's about ensuring animal welfare, isn't it? So ensuring that these animals are actually having a good time. It's not there as a barrier or making it difficult for you as potential pet owners. It's there to protect the animals, so it's a really good thing.
It is very much, and they will get inspected and have to meet some quite sort of rigorous standards, which is really important. And it's the welfare not only of the puppies and the kittens, but the mothers particularly, and if people keep a male, the welfare of them, because with cats particularly, if it's a pedigree or a purebred cat breeder, the stud cats tend to be kept in sheds because they tend to smell a bit and to spray, and sometimes they don't always have a great time because their environment's very restricted. So it's important, if you're looking to get a purebred animal, that you'll go to a licensed breeder where it's possible.
So we're talking about the animal welfare establishments licensing that's hopefully going to come in, but in terms of, yes, it's great that there's something there for the breeders, but how can we ensure therefore with the charities that we're going to, how do we know that the charities are okay, how they're keeping their animals? I know certainly there are occasionally, in my time working at the RSPCA, there were reports that came in about different animal rehoming organisations, and we sent inspectors out to investigate. So although we hope that they're all keeping animals in good conditions and good welfare, sadly that's not always the case. So there are inspections though that are carried out now, aren't they? And some of the organisations are part of a bigger body. So
it's sadly, like anything, there are good rehoming organisations and there are some that are not so good, and often it's not really, it's not deliberate at all, but often they've taken in too many animals and they can't actually look after them properly. And so in Scotland now, you have to get a licence if you're rehoming animals. But in the rest of the UK and Ireland, there's an organisation called the Association of Dogs and Cats Homes, and to be a member of that you've got to have certain standards, and it's about the standard of the accommodation, the vet care, the animals getting vaccinated, getting wormed, that they've got good sort of behavioural programmes and socialisation programmes. And so you can find out from them, the ADCH, on their website who their members are, and we would strongly suggest that if you're going to go to a rehoming charity, that you go to one that is a member, because then you'd know they have got decent standards, and the standards are actually on the website as well that you can look at if that's something that you're interested in.
So that's just going to the ADCH website.
Yes.
There are more and more smaller charities are joining all the time, aren't they? So which is great news.
They are. It's really great news, because not only do they sort of have the standards and they have inspections, etc., but also they do a lot of training. They offer a lot of free or very low cost training to encourage people to improve, because there's new research coming out all the time, new information, and we want people really to be working to the best and newest standards. So much as you might feel sort of sorry for perhaps the local person who's overrun with cats or rabbits or whatever, sometimes in those situations they're not actually that healthy. We've certainly seen situations where rescuers have become hoarders, and where the charity we worked for had to take many tens of animals, 50, 60 or whatever, out of houses. It is worth looking at the sort of standards that the actual organisation has, because they're certainly not all the same.
Yeah, so in terms of, I think, for wrapping up for today, let's go through just a few of the kind of the warnings, or the things that we want people to just be really aware of, the take-home messages, I suppose, in terms of getting your own pet, where you're going to go, because I think we can go on to next time talk about bringing that bundle of joy home, which will be really good to talk about. The really
exciting bit of settling them in. But I suppose the things I would say is, firstly, don't buy online.
Yeah,
I think that's
key, isn't it? Really
key thing. Don't buy online. You might be able to sort of locate a breeder online, but then you want to have personal contact.
Definitely. Know where that animal's coming from.
Yeah, and see, if you're getting a puppy or kitten, see it with its mother and get some information about the male if at all possible. And yeah, what's the home like? Is it clean? How are the animals being treated? What vet care have they had? And I suppose my other bit would be, much as it's tempting, I'd say don't get animals that have come in from abroad. Yeah. I think there's a lot of welfare issues, both with what those animals have to go through, but also the potential of bringing in diseases to this country. And sadly, we know that they should have all had rabies vaccines, but we know there are cases where the rabies vaccination certificate has been faked, and these animals are coming in from countries that have rabies, and we've been rabies free for a long time, and we really wouldn't want rabies to come to the UK. That would be terrible. So it's sort of being sensible and doing your research, really, I suppose.
It really is. So for me, it's never meet the person you're going to get the animal from the car park, or the supermarket, or wherever. And make sure again that you know where the animals come from, and that you've seen that home environment. And it's okay, even if you end up in that situation, don't feel obliged to take the animal on. You can walk away and say, there's something not quite right here.
Yeah.
And actually not go through with purchasing that animal.
And if you feel really sorry for the animal, I know it's really tempting to take it, but as vets in practice, we've seen many kittens with cat flu and whatever, where people have felt sorry for them and bought them, and then there's been a lot of challenges afterwards. So you can, and if you're really worried about the establishment, then you can report them to the local council or RSPCA. So there are things you can do to help the situation, but hopefully you're going to get an animal that is with you for many years, and you have a really happy relationship, and that's the important thing. We want to help you to make good decisions.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah. So until next time,
thank you for listening.
Bye. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Vet Stalking Pets with Dr. Maggie Roberts and Dr. Vanessa Howie. If you have any questions or comments, please email us at info@advovet.co.uk. And please join us again for our next episode. Your pets will thank you.